Hello students, I welcome back you to the botany class once again. And so in continuation with the last class, I would like to start with you or discuss with you the plasma membrane and cell wall. We'll discuss about the differences between prokaryotic cell, eukaryotic cell, differences between plant cell and animal cell. Okay, so today I'd like to see the structure of plasma membrane in detail and plant cell walls. Okay, so this plasma membrane is present in both prokaryotic cells and eukaryotic cells, and it is present in both plant cells and animal cells. So straight away into this diagram, fluid mosaic model of plasma membrane was proposed by Singer and Nicholson in 1972, and this is one of the most important model proposed of model for plasma membrane. Prior to this, even the unit membrane model was proposed by by other scientists, but of late this fluid mosaic model of Singer and Nicholson proved to be the most effective explanation of plasma membrane. Okay, so this plasma membrane or biological membranes, they are made up of proteins and lipids. They are made up of proteins and lipids, and the proteins in plasma membrane constitute about 60 to 70%, while the lipids in plasma membrane, they are about 30 to 40%, and the lipids in the plasma membrane, they are chiefly of phospholipids. And these lipids in the plasma membrane, they are arranged in two layers. They arrange in two layers, and in between these lipid layers, they are protein molecules which runs along the length, or they are present even on the exterior surface of the lipid molecules. Okay, so these proteins and lipids which constitute the plasma membrane, they are not evenly arranged. They are not uniformly arranged, but they are arranged in mosaic pattern. They are arranged in mosaic pattern, as such giving rise to the fluid mosaic model, or protein icebergs in the sea of lipids. So that's how it came out with this mosaic arrangement of the proteins and lipid molecules. So these proteins which are present in the plasma membrane, they are of two types: intrinsic proteins and extrinsic proteins. And the intrinsic proteins, examples of these are glycoproteins, and they constitute about 70% of the total proteins present in the plasma membrane. While example of extrinsic proteins are spectrin, actin, and collagen, and they constitute about 30%. So intrinsic proteins are present or embedded in the lipid layers. These are proteins which are present in the lipid layers. They are embedded, and they are also known as integral proteins. While extrinsic proteins or external proteins, they are those proteins which are present on the surface of the lipid molecules or exteriorly. Okay, so the lipids in this plasma membrane or in the plasma membrane, they are arranged in two layers, and they have a hydrophilic head. The lipid molecules, they are amphipathic, and they have hydrophilic heads which face outwards, and they have hydrophobic tail which face each other. So these lipid molecules or phospholipids, they form a bilayer, and in between that, interspersed in between the lipid molecules are proteins which runs along, which projects even outside the lipid layers, and there are some proteins which are present on the surface which are known as the extrinsic proteins, and the other they are known as intrinsic proteins. Okay, some of the intrinsic proteins can move inside the lipid layers. Some of the intrinsic proteins, and these proteins serve as carriers for active transport. Some of the example of this are this is an example of integral protein. They can move, they can rotate inside the lipid layers, and as such they serve to carry molecules for active transport. While some proteins, globular proteins, which projects even outside the lipid layers, they have channels. And they have channels through which soluble substances can pass through it. And there are some peripheral proteins. Which are associated with sugar molecules or oligosaccharides, which act as receptors. So proteins present on the plasma membrane, they act as carriers. They act as they can act as enzymes. They act as channels, and even they act as receptors. Okay, so the proteins present on the plasma membrane, they are associated with glycoproteins, they are associated with oligosaccharides, and they are known as glycoproteins, and they act as receptors. And even some of the lipids molecules, they are associated with sugar molecules or oligosaccharides, and they form glycolipids. And one of the important feature of this mosaic model of Singer and Nicholson is the fluidity nature of this model, fluidity nature of these lipid molecules, the asymmetry, because they are not arranged uniformly, they are arranged in mosaic pattern, giving rise to the asymmetry, and the mosaic arrangement of the lipids and protein molecules. So three important features: fluidity, asymmetry, and mosaic characters are some of the important features of this fluid mosaic model. Okay, so this type of structure is present in both prokaryotic cells, eukaryotic cells, present in both plant cells and animal cells, and even later on we'll be discussing this, the membrane of mitochondria and even chloroplasts, they have this structure. They have membranes which resembles this structure in microscopic observation. So what is the function of this plasma membrane? What is the function? This plasma membrane forms the cell boundary. They forms the cell boundary, maintaining individuality of the cell. You know that these animal cells are devoid of cell wall, so this plasma membrane forms the outermost membrane. So it forms the cell boundary, and as such, it separates the internal components of the cell with the external environment and enabling it to maintain its individuality. Then the next function of the plasma membrane is protecting the cell protoplasm from external injury and contaminants, protecting the protoplasm from external injury and contaminants. Then one of the most important functions of the plasma membrane is transport and selective permeability. The cell wall is freely permeable while the plasma membrane is selectively permeable, in a sense that it will allow only certain molecules to come inside the cell, and it will allow only certain molecules to move out of the cell. So selective permeability. And during the process of movement, some molecules move without the expenditure of energy. They can move in and out without the expenditure of energy, and that is known as passive transport, while some molecules, the movement requires energy, and that movement is known as active transport, and it requires carrier molecules, or the movement of molecules, be it passive or active, requires carrier molecules or channels. Okay, so transport and selective permeability. Then the next is recognition of substances. The glycoproteins and glycolipids, which are present on the plasma membrane, they act as receptors of substances. They act as receptors of hormones, neurotransmitters, and antigens. And it is because of this glycoproteins and glycolipids that the cell can recognize each other. And this cell recognition helps plays an important role in blood grouping, then immune response, then during the transplant of organs, the cancer, and even in the cancer treatment or rejection of transplanted organs and tissues. Then another function is forming absorptive surface. You know that in bacteria, the plasma membrane gives rise to enfoldings known as the mesosomes. So these mesosomes are thought to be the sites of respiration and also increases the surface area of absorption. And also in the intestines of human beings and animals, the plasma membrane, they are variously folded, giving rise to villi, which increases the absorption of the plasma membrane. Then another important character or function of plasma membrane is conducting impulse in nerve cells. The neurons, the plasma membrane of the neurons helps in conducting impulses, and as I've said, the membrane of thylakoids, these thylakoids are structures which are present in the chloroplast. We'll be discussing in the next class. They are the sites of photosynthesis, and these contain this contains pigments and enzymes which are involved in photosynthesis. Then another is this plasma membrane forms the outer covering of cilia and flagella. Cilia and flagella, they are thread-like structures or finger-like structures which helps in the movement, and this plasma membrane forms the covering of cilia and flagella. So these are some of the important functions of plasma membrane, and this plasma membrane, as I've said, consists of protein and lipids form a bilayer, and interspersed in between them are the proteins. Okay, so next is the cell wall. Okay, this cell wall is present only in plant cells. They are absent in case of animal cells, while they are present only in case of plant cells. And these plant cells, they were first observed by Robert Hooke in 1665, and they are about 1 to 3 nanometer micrometer in thickness, and it consists of 3 layers. The cell wall in plants, they consist of 3 layers: the middle lamella, primary wall, and secondary wall. In fact, this middle lamella is the cementing substance present in between the adjoining cells. Is the cementing substance, and it's made out of calcium and magnesium pectate. It is responsible for holding the adjoining cells together, the middle lamella. The next is the primary wall. The primary wall is formed next to the middle lamella on either sides, means on the adjoining neighboring cells, and is made up of cellulose, hemicellulose, pectin. The primary wall is made up of cellulose, hemicellulose, and pectin, and the primary walls are thin and they are permeable. Okay, so primary walls occurs in young cells, and when the cells becomes matured, another wall is laid on the side of the primary wall, and this wall is known as the secondary wall. So secondary wall occurs only in mature cells, and further this secondary wall consists of 3 layers, S1, S2, and S3, and it is strengthened. The secondary wall is strengthened by the deposition of hemicellulose, then pectin, lignin, and suberin. So this primary wall, the middle lamella, primary wall, and secondary wall are the 3 wall layers found in plant cells, and internal to the wall layer or the secondary wall is the plasma membrane. Okay, so these are the 3 walls found in case of plant cells, while it is absent in case of animal cells. So what are the functions of the cell wall? What are the functions of the cell wall? Okay, one function of the cell wall is that it provides mechanical strength to the cells and to the plant as a whole. It provides mechanical strength. This cell wall is rigid. Okay, the cell wall is rigid. As such, it provides mechanical strength to the cell and to the plant as a whole. Provides mechanical strength to the cell and to the plants as a whole. Then it protects internal components of the cell. It protects the internal components of the cell. Being the outermost layer or being the outermost covering, it protects the internal components of the cell. So it protects the protoplasm, it protects the internal cellular organelles like mitochondria, chloroplast, in the plasmid reticulum, ribosomes, or vacuoles. So it protects the protoplasm as well as the internal components of the cell. Then it maintains the shape of the cells. This cell wall helps in maintaining the shape of the cells. It helps in maintaining the shape of the cells. And the other is prevent osmotic bursting of the cell. Being rigid, it is able to withstand the osmotic bursting of the cell, osmotic pressure from the cell. Or whenever a cell is immersed in a solution having a lower water potential than the external environment, then water molecules from outside will move into the cell, and as such, the cells begin to swell. And as the cell begins to swell, the plasma membrane puts a pressure on the cell wall. But the cell does not burst because the cell wall is allowed to prevent the bursting of the cell. It put a pressure on the plasma membrane, which is known as the wall pressure. So it's able to withstand the pressure exerted by the plasma membrane. As such, it prevents the cell from bursting. For example, it is the soaking of dry seeds in water, you find that. So these are some of the important functions of the cell wall, providing mechanical strength into the cell and to the plant as a whole. Then it also protects the internal components of the cell, including all the cell organelles, the vacuoles, the ribosomes, the enzymes, and maintains the shape of the cells, because of its rigidity in nature, it helps the cells to maintain its definite shape and also prevent the osmotic bursting of the cell. And you know that organisms are not composed of a single cell. They are composed of a number of cells, millions of cells, or even trillions of cells. And these cells maintain continuity. The cytoplasm of the cells, of the neighboring cells, they maintain continuity with one another. And this continuity of the cytoplasm of the adjoining cells is because of certain cytoplasmic strands which run through certain pores, special pores known as plasmodesmata. So it is through this plasmodesmata, these are special structures or pores which are present on the cell walls, and it is through this plasmodesmata that the cytoplasm of the adjoining cells are able to be continued with one another. So the plasmodesmata plays an important role in the cytoplasmic continuity of the cell, and it also helps in the flow of cell contents from one cell to another. So these are two important structures, plasma membrane present in both prokaryotic cell, eukaryotic cell, and present in both plant cell, animal cell. While in case of animal cell, it forms the outermost covering, and prior to this fluid mosaic model, it was proposed, the unit membrane model was proposed, where it consists of proteins and lipids, where lipids are sandwiched in between the protein molecules. While in case of this fluid mosaic model proposed by Singer and Nicholson, they suggested that it's not uniformly arranged. They are arranged in mosaic pattern, and it consists of proteins, two types: extrinsic proteins, intrinsic proteins. Intrinsic proteins, they are they are present in between the lipid layers, while extrinsic proteins, they are present on the peripheral area of the lipids, and the lipid molecules forms a bilayer, and the lipids are chiefly of phospholipids. The protein constitutes about 60 to 70%, and lipids 30 to 40%, and the proteins present on the plasma membrane, they can act as carriers during the active transport of molecules from one cell to another cell, or from external environment into the cell. Energy is required, and also care is required. So in those cases, proteins that are present on the plasma membrane, they act as carriers. They carry the molecules, and from outside to the inside of the cell, they also can act as channels for the movement of substances. Then the glycolipids and glycoproteins, which are present or which are associated with the proteins and the lipids, they act as receptors of neurotransmitters, hormones, and also helps in the cell recognition, which plays a very important role in blood grouping, immune response, then recognizing of rejection of transplanted organs and tissues. Then the other important functions of the plasma membrane includes it forms the outermost covering and forms the outermost boundary in case of animal cells or prokaryotic cells, and then it also helps in conducting impulse in nerve cells, protecting the cell protoplasm from external injury and contaminants. Then it forms the outermost covering in cilia and flagella. So these are some of the important functions of plasma membrane and cell wall respectively. And this plasma membrane, the structure is the same in case of, as I've said, mitochondria. The outer membrane, it has got two membranes, outer and inner. Chloroplast has got outer and inner, it has got thylakoids. So all these membranes, they exhibit the same structure of plasma membrane, same as in the case of bacteria. So this structure, if you know it detailedly, it will help you a lot even in physiology at the end of your text, or at the end of the syllabus, physiology, which will come into great importance in case if you know this plasma membrane in detail. Okay, so with this, I warm up the structure and functions of plasma membrane, and in the next class we can discuss about the structure of mitochondria and chloroplast in detail. Thank you.